My dad's a metal fabricator and a welder, and my uncle's a welder, my brother's a welder, and it's kind of like a family, it's a family trade. I was always interested in like masculinity as an ethos to represent kind of power, and so that they're working with like car culture, and I suppose being brought up around a lot of very masculine men in my life that were always, that I understood their sensitivities. I am Hannah Perry, I'm an artist. I make video, installation, performance and sculpture. I'm about to put on a show at Somerset House called GUSH. I'm also a Somerset House Studio resident, and I've been working here for about a year. I suppose I used to make a lot of work that was kind of looking at gender and social class and kind of the way in which we sort of navigate through those spaces. And 2 years ago, my best friend committed suicide. He had schizophrenia, bipolar schizophrenia, but mostly he was all right. I feel like grief is such a weird thing, and it's death and grief and suicide, they're all kind of, and mental health space, they're all kind of weird taboos that people don't particularly like to talk about, or don't know how to talk about them or something. I started to make work about a very different subject, but I realised that all these kind of emotions that were kind of essentially all leading back to the fact that I'd lost my friend. One thing that I've found quite interesting in relation to my previous work is often mental health kind of problems, and self-help is gendered. There's a lot of talk at the time about this kind of, these new terminologies like toxic masculinity, and how that was always kind of talked about in regards to like feminism, and as an opponent to women. You know, if you think about if the male suicide rate is kind of like the biggest killer of men under sort of 40 in the UK. There's a sort of dominant ideology, I suppose, that kind of favours men, but it is to their detriment if, you know, it is about not being able to, being perceived as vulnerable. That's how I started to feel about what happened to Pete, in some kind of context and some kind of distance. With rage fluids, then generally like using car sort of paraphernalia, it's like, I was quite interested in this idea of the mechanics of the car, so things like looking at the suspension system being shock absorbers, and particularly when we're talking about having a trauma on impact or a crash or something. You know, when you have that kind of impact or something that happens in your life, there's a lot of things that were closely connected to the idea of traumatized metal. In particular, I've always been interested in kind of connecting the car body as a sort of fetishized male object to the body. The bass notes cause the vibrations in the air, and they move and wobble a quite thin car heat wrap that we've sort of stretched over the top. In a way, the whole thing sort of like shakes and vibrates, almost like sort of like panic attacks. The backbone of the film is a script that I wrote around 6 months ago. With the 360, I wanted it to be a very immersive experience, something that surrounds you, it's kind of all-encompassing. I also kind of wanted it to be this bridge between film and performance in some kind of way. There will be live movement with 4 dancers in the performance, and there will be a live sort of performance score played live by London Contemporary Orchestra, Mika Levy and Kobe Say. Well, I feel like working with performance, it's very kind of, it's very immediate in a kind of physical sense, or in a kind of emotional sense. It's incredibly immediate, and the live aspect always kind of has a certain energy around it which you can't kind of replicate. If we can somehow like normalize the conversations around mental health, or around death, or around suicide, or around kind of, you know, how we negotiate that with one another, or I think if somebody comes away feeling like less alienated to those experiences, then it's all kind of been worthwhile.